The first two videos established the following. So the first one, we really needed to understand where we came from and what the paradigm shift was to in terms of competency-based medical education. So hopefully we understood a little bit about the Flexnerian model and what the driving forces were to change to competency-based medical education in the early part of the 21st century. In the second video, we tried to establish for you really what is the central tenet of competency-based medical education and how does it differ from structured process education. So what we'd like to do in this one is to sort of establish how do we get from point A to point B. What are the necessary steps to go from structured process education as outlined by Flexner or as determined by Flexner to the model that we have now or that we desire of competency-based medical education. So that process is actually a four-step process. And the first step is just to establish the outcomes. Makes sense, right? If you're going to go to a fixed outcome, variable time form of education, you got to start with fixing the outcomes. What are the outcomes that you desire? Sounds very easy. Actually has been a complicated process in the United States, partly because of the discontinuity between undergraduate, graduate, and continuing medical education. What I will say is that it's been predominantly driven by the ACGME, the Accreditation Council for Graduate Medical Education, and their outcome project. And that project, which sort of established itself in the late 90s and came to fruition in the early 2000s, was designed exactly to do what we were talking about. It was designed to say, what are the desired outcomes? And what they did was to establish 6 domains of competence, 6 big areas of competence for the physician in the 21st century. As we had started to talk about in the last video, the original domains of competence that were really the focus of Flexnerian education were patient care and medical knowledge. Over the course of the latter half of the 20th century, there became increasing interest in the role of professionalism and interpersonal and communication skills in the formation of a physician. And towards the early part of the 21st century is really when these notions of systems-based practice and practice-based learning and improvement emerged as requisite for the 21st century physician. So at this point, we've really established that there are these 6 domains, these 6 big areas of competence: patient care, medical knowledge, practice-based learning and improvement, systems-based practice, professionalism, and interpersonal communication skills. Now, I will say that a bunch of us from the Association of American Medical Colleges did a study of over 150 competency lists representing physicians across the continuum and also even some of the other health professions. And what we ended up with was a list that covered every competency we could find internationally and nationally of 8 domains of competence and 58 competencies within those domains. The 8 domains were the same 6 that I mentioned to you, and in addition we added something called personal and professional development, which speaks to things like the ability to balance personal and professional responsibilities, trustworthiness, confidence that puts patients and families at ease, the ability to recognize one's limitations and seek help, the ability to manage stress. And the second domain that we added was interprofessional collaboration. And while all of those competencies, the personal and professional development and the interprofessional collaboration competencies, you can probably map to either teamwork or to either interpersonal communication skills or professionalism or systems-based practice within the ACGME framework. We felt they were important enough to breed out. So either way you look at it, we are finally in agreement to some extent, from UME to GME to CME, about what the requisite outcomes are for a physician in the 21st century. And what we'll do probably is focus, as this is going to be a predominantly GME audience, on those 6 domains of the ACGME. But I want you to know that there are those other competencies that in personal and professional development, interprofessional collaboration, that when added really cover the gamut of almost everything that's out there in the literature. So step 1, establish the outcomes. I think we're there. Step 2 then is to say, what are the performance levels? So it's one thing to say that somebody should have competence, for example, in developing and carrying out management plans, which is a patient care competency. The problem is, how do I know when I'm watching a learner how well they're doing at that? And so that's where performance levels come in. And we actually didn't do it with the first iteration of the Outcomes Project. But what happened was Tom Naska joined as the new executive director of the ACGME, and he said we need performance levels and we need to agree on them. And that's how the Milestones Project came up. So milestones are the answer to the second step in getting to competency-based education. They are providing stepwise fashion performance levels provided as descriptive behaviors so that we all know what it looks like when somebody is a novice, an advanced beginner, competent proficient, or an expert in that competency. So again, step 1, establish the outcomes. Step 2, develop performance levels. Step 3 in getting to competency-based medical education is to develop a framework for assessment. And what I will tell you is, this has been a frustrating area for a lot of us in medical education. And the reason is that sometimes when you break things down into their component competencies, the unit of measurement becomes so small as to feel meaningless. How many of us have stood in a room with a student given a checklist by our program director that has 30 items on it? And it just isn't the way we watch our learners or think about our learners. And at the end of the day, many of those learners can get all of those check boxes right, and yet I walk out of the room feeling a little empty and worried about their ability to actually do that if I weren't in the room. So the integration of these competencies is critical. I'm going to talk briefly about some of the differences in terms of the guiding principles of assessment in a competency-based system versus a structured process system. And then in our last video, we're going to turn to a concept called Entrustable professional activities, which is one of the solutions to integrating what seems often very granular and hard to hold on to assessment tools. So again, right now I want to go to what are some of the differences guiding principle-wise, and then in the next video we'll talk about EPAs, or Entrustable professional activities.